Okay, hello everyone. Hello. Um, iteration 1 going on well? Yep. Okay. Yeah. Cool. So before we start the lecture, maybe let's have a look at all the lectures this term. So now we are here at 4.3 HTTP servers. Some of you may find that the first half of the course is pretty intense, or a lot of new contents, a lot of new concepts. What I can do to comfort you is that today's lecture is the very last lecture that is very high like a lot of new things, or a little bit tricky to learn. After this lecture today, the lectures will be much lightweighted. Okay, so this course is so we want to give you everything that you need for your project, and then you can practice on using the project and practice on those concepts and all the new things. So we kind of give you everything in the first half of the term, and in the second half, still new things, but they are much lighter weighted. So I hope that helps. And today's lecture is also one of the most important lectures in this course. So we'll be talking about HTTP servers. After this lecture, after you practice on HTTP servers in iteration 2 or even iteration 3, you will find that there's a lot of things that you can play with, like the ChatGPT's API. You find that you can start to use that, you can develop your own APIs or your own applications. So this one is very important and also very interesting. So I hope this one will help. And also, we'll release iteration 2 this weekend. So after iteration 1 is due, and to lecture 5.1, so the first lecture next week, you already have everything that you need for your iteration 2. Yeah, I hope that I can release you a little bit. So, yeah, okay. So HTTP servers. So in this lecture, we'll talk about web servers, what is network, what is Express server, how to develop a web server, what is API, how to use them, and also how to communicate with the server. So this is what we are going to talk about today. And we are only going to talk about HTTP servers today. So first of all, network. This is not a network course, but a little bit introduction to this concept will be helpful for our following explanations on HTTP servers. So network, what is a network? So imagine you have a lab, and all the computers in the lab, they are kind of connected and can communicate with each other, even without using a web browser or emails, they can still connect with each other. So this is a network, like a group of interconnected computers that can talk to each other. So this is a network. And internet is a global network, so much larger scale, connected computers and the Intel work together. So this is internet, a larger scale of network. And World Wide Web, sometimes we also refer to the web, or WWW. So the World Wide Web, or the web, is a subset of internet that you can use like a browser, put in a URL, and it will load a page for you. So that is the web. So it's a subset of the internet. So internet also include communication using emails or instant messages, but the web only referring to the way that you use your browser, enter a URL, and load some information for you. So that is the web. And this is also our focus today. So it's very popular and getting growing attention these days. We have web applications, and they are referring to applications on the web. Yep. So the web, before the web, so web is invented by Sir Tim in 1989. So before that, Tim said like there are different information on different computers, and you just have to log on to different computers to get it. It's much like sometimes it can be easier, like even asking for this information during like a coffee time, like having a coffee, but it's not directly accessible to get information from other computers. So before the web, and by October 1990, Tim had written 3 fundamental technologies that remain the fundamental of today's web. So these are HTTP, URI, or HTML. So HTTP is the language that we use to have different computers on the internet to talk with each other. So we'll talk a little bit more about HTTP today. And URI, like we normally referring to it to URL. So basically the link you put it here. So for example, this link, so this is the URI or the URL. And the last one is HTML. So we will not cover HTML in this course. Yep. So today we'll mainly focus on HTTP and URI or URL. So what is HTTP? So the full name of HTTP is Hypertext Transfer Protocol. What is a protocol? A protocol is a set of rules that two computers or two entities can understand each other. So for example, English is a language protocol. Like for example, speaker 1 said, how's the weather today? So he's speaking in English, using English words, following the English grammar, so that the speaker 2 can understand what speaker 1 is talking about. So how's the weather today? And speaker 2 will say, it is very sunny today. And speaker 1 can also understand what speaker 2 is talking about because they are following the same rule that they can both understand what they are talking about. And HTTP is the language used for the web. So imagine you have 2 computers on the web and they want to talk to each other, so they need to follow the same rules. Like they need to use the same language, they need to use, like for example, the same grammar, how is the weather today, right? So this is protocol, and HTTP is the Hypertext Transfer Protocol. Hypertext meaning that, for example, you open like a web page and there are some links that you can click on and it can direct you to another page. So this is hypertext. So HTTP is the protocol that defines how data is transferred over the internet or the network. And it is the standard protocol used by web browsers and the web servers. So when we want to have 2 computers talk to each other over the web, like you want to, like you put in a link and you click on a button in your page. So the server or the other computers on the internet will know which page to load or which information to show, to display on the browser. So they have a standard language to talk to each other. And HTTP is the standard protocol for the web. So HTTP has some main components to it. And 2 of the most important components is the client, or sometimes we also refer to the user agent. Mainly is the web browser. And also we have the web server. So server is a remote machine or a virtual machine that provides you the information that the browser asking for. Okay, let's have a more detailed look at these 2. So client and user agent. Client, normally we're referring to as user agent. So user agent is a tool that acts on behalf of the user. So for example, we want a page, we want to get to the next page after this slide. Okay, so this is what the user wants. And the browser or the tool act on behalf of the user. Right? So we talk to the computer, next page please, they cannot understand, right? So the browser acts on behalf of the user, and it is called the user agent. But sometimes the user agent can also be some debugging tools. Like we as a developer, as a software engineer, like we may have other tools to act on behalf of the user. So normally referring to the browser, but sometimes can be also some applications that act on behalf of the user. So this is the client. And the message sent by the client is called requests. Okay, so next page please. So this is a request. So the client can send requests. Okay. The other important component is called the web server. So the web server serves the document as requested by the client. Okay, so the server has what the user agent asks for. So the information about next page, for example, the file of next page, or the image, or audio, or video. So the server serves all of these. Okay. And the term web server can refer to both hardware or software. So for example, like the virtual machine sitting, the machine sitting on CSE, right? The server for VLab. So there might be a real machine sitting in the CSE building or AWS building. Okay? But it can also have some software. So the server software that can understand the HTTP, understand the URL, and understand how to respond. So the server software. So when we say the server, it may referring to both the server hardware or software. But today we'll be focusing on the software. So for the hardware, like can be just a computer, and we can save the file in that, right? So we'll be focusing on the software. And the message sent by the server is called responses. Okay, so the message sent by the client is called requests, and messages sent by the server is called responses. Okay, so we've covered the hardware side, the software side. So normally we use like HTTP server. So minimum with a server, minimum it should has HTTP server, and HTTP server is the software that understands URLs and HTTP. Right. And an HTTP server can be accessed through the domain name of the website it stores, for example, webCMS, the domain name, and it delivered the content of the hosted website to the end user's device, like a laptop or your mobile phone or other devices. Okay, so now let's have a closer look at HTTP server. What does the HTTP server do? The primary function, so the primary thing that the HTTP server does is to store, process, and deliver the web pages to the client using HTTP. Okay, so it can process the URL and deliver the web page to the client using HTTP. So this is the main thing that HTTP server does. So how can we have an HTTP server today? So I try to develop an HTTP server and practice our play with it. Okay. One of the most popular NPM libraries, again another library, is called Express server. And Express server is actually a framework. So with NPM, we know that we can install both libraries and the framework. Remembering the difference between library and the framework. So library is the one that we install using NPM, and we can use that as part of our function. So for example, the date function. And framework, we actually installed one framework before. Remembering what is that? Yes, Jest. So Jest is the framework that we used before. And Express server is another framework. and we can install using npm. So let's have a look at Express server. So from line 1 to line 11, those 11 lines can start a server. Very powerful, right? So how does it work? Let's have a look. Oops, not this one. Okay, so this is actually a very similar code to what Express server had on their website. So Express server basics. Here's the code. Before we explain each line in this code, let's just run it first and see how it works, and then we'll go through the code line by line. Okay, so now, oops, clear. Okay, so this is a TS code, like TypeScript code. So I use npm run TS node in the source folder, and this file is called 4.2 express basic.ts. Okay, it says listening on port 3001. We will explain what port means, but before we do that, I'm going to open a browser. So remember, like how we talk to the server, like we have a user agent, and here is the browser. So in this case, it's the browser. So I will run this first, and I will explain. So localhost. So you can see here, hello world. So we have started a server, and the server responds to us with a hello world. Okay, so now let's have a look at this code. So here, this line, like import the Express server that we installed from npm. Like we installed import Express from Express. So that we have the library, we have the framework that we can use. And the next two lines, like line 3, app assigned with Express. So this creates an instance of a server. So this creates an instance of the Express server. And we define the network port to run now, which is 3001. What is the port? A good example that I heard other people talking is, imagine that you have a laptop and you have different USB ports, right? All of them are the same, like they are just different ports that you can use, and you have multiple ports, USB ports on your laptop. And you can connect with different devices using the port, right? So this is similar here. So for your server, you also have multiple ports. And if one port is in use, you cannot use that for like connecting to other devices, right? So you can only connect with one port at once. So let's play with it a little bit. So for ports, like it's just a number that you can choose from, and we can choose from, like normally we choose from above 3,000 to 65,000, so 65K. And there are some ports that we cannot use. For example, for your laptop, there are also some special ports. For example, they are no, they are the same. The USB ports are the same. But you may have a charger. Like you can with some of the ports, they are designed to charge your laptop, right? So you cannot use those ports for other purposes, like connect to your iPad or the others. For the server's port is similar. So there are some ports that are used for specific purposes. What are they? port, server port. But normally if you use some port number above 3000, they are not predefined. So it's, you can use that. But when you are working on the CS machine, like we are working on VLab, sometimes you find like you put in a port number, so for example 3000, and you run again, it will give you an error message, and what it says that it's already in use. So 3000, so this port is already being used. This is because like for VLab, so for example, two groups are working on VLab, and both of you are using port 3000. So the VLab is actually a machine, right? So you are actually sharing a same physical machine, right? So for server, we need to have a hardware that the server software is running on, right? So that is the machine like VLab. Yeah, that is the remote machine. So if you found like you see this error message that already being used, like 3000, you can simply change to another one. So this happens a lot in 1531, like when a lot of groups are running their iteration 2, and when you found that your address is already in use, just change to another number. So for example, here you can also change to like 10. It would be yep, it works, right? So no error message. So why the 3000 was in use before? It was because I was running the slide on localhost. So you can see my slide is actually running here using 3000. So 3000, the port has already been used on my laptop for displaying the slides. Okay, so what is localhost? So why do we have a localhost? So when you're trying to access web CMS, the URL is www.webcms. something, and for YouTube it's www.youtube and something, right? So localhost is using your laptop or using your machine as the server to display something and return the message to your laptop. Yeah, so your laptop is the server now, and we are running this server software on our laptop. So other people cannot access, like for example, what I have here. So I'm running Outgood with localhost 3010, but if you want to access this URL on your laptop, it will not work because this one, so this page, only now available locally on my laptop. Okay, we will talk later in the course about how we can deploy our application so that everywhere in the world, like people can access the page. But for now, localhost is only available on your laptop. And localhost is actually very useful. Like before you have finished your software, before it's ready to be used by people around the world, you may want to test your software, like your web application, or test your web page locally. And when it's ready to release, when it's ready to deploy, and then you can deploy it. So before that, software engineers, we use localhost to test and make sure everything's working fine. Okay, so this is this line and this line. So let's move on and explain other lines. So this line, so line 6, app.use. So when we had this line 3 before, app is now one instance of Express server. So now we can use app, and it's very powerful. Has many like methods or library functions that we can use now, and use is one of them. And this line simply tells like what kind of data we are using now, and now it's just plain text, and we'll see other examples later on in this lecture. So now it's just text. We are just returning like hello world, like a string. What this line means? So first of all, app.get dash. So dash that string is the URL. So now we have three like 3010 and the dash is our main page here. So let's have a look. So this is the URL that we have here. But we can also change that. So for example, we can change it to COMP1531 like that. And now let's restart this server. And when you refresh this page again, it doesn't show the hello world again because we have already changed the URL. So we need to make the URL properly reflect what we have changed, which is COMP1531. It says hello world. So this is what this string here means. So it can be anything. You can also add more, like COMP1531, hello, 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 and hello. Okay, so now let's restart this server. Okay, and update this URL into hello, hello, hello world. Okay, you can also have multiple ones. So for example, this is the first URL that we have. We can also have COMP1531 HTTP like that. Okay, let's restart the server. And this one still works. So the first one, like with hello, hello, still works. But you can also change that to, what was it? It's HTTP. HTTP. It works. You can also change what we send from the server. For example, here we change to hello everyone. Okay, just quickly play with it a little bit. And then you refresh the page. The second one, like which the HTTP server, what is returned now is hello everyone. Yep. So this is the URL here. Any questions so far? All good? Yep, cool. So let's come back to here. So I'll remove this one, make it a little bit simpler. Okay. So this is like app get. So last lecture when we talk about advanced functions, we mentioned that we can have function as parameter. So callbacks. Right? So here's the callbacks, and we use an anonymous function here. Yep. Cool. We'll explain what is request and what is response later. And response sent is like what we want to send back to the browser, like what we want to send from the server. Remembering that the message sent from the server is called response, and the message sent from the client, like the user agent, is called request. Right? So this is the request, and this is the response. And here we want to send in the response a hello world. So this is what this line makes. Okay, let's move on. The app.listen actually starts the server. So without this line, your server is not actually started. So this line starts your server on the particular port that we defined above. Okay, and it essentially runs an infinite loop, so it never ends until we terminate. So you can see that listening on port 30 and 10, it never stops. It only stops when we terminate using Control-C. So using Control-C, we terminate it, we stop it. Otherwise, it will be an infinite loop, and it will be listening to our course. So let's have a try. Yes, actually we have already demonstrated this one. So let's try that again with a more explicit example. So we can console log with some message. Remembering console log only prints out the message in your terminal, right? It doesn't display any return message on your web browser, right? Only using like write send, you send message back to your browser. But using console log, it only prints out message on your terminal. So let's print out someone is calling me, right? So whenever we trigger this one, it will print out console log this message in your terminal. So now let's start our server again. Listening on port, okay, and it's 1531. Someone is calling me. It's triggered once. Let's call it another time. Someone is calling me, right? So it's always listening to the request sending from our user agent. So the web browser here, it's always listening to us. It's an infinite loop until we terminate the server. So we, oops. We can use Ctrl+C to stop that. So this is what the lines here does. Okay, clear? All good? What about online? Looks fine. Yeah, cool. So now we've explained this basic Express server. And if you want your server to do more things, like having more features, more functionalities, you will need to add more here, right, or other way. So how do the client and the server application communicate with each other? So how do they communicate? So in between of the user agent and the server, we need something in between, and this is called API. So API, you can think of API as the gateway between a user agent and a server. So it cannot stand alone by itself. So API cannot stand alone by itself. Have you heard of the term API before? And where did you heard of that? No? Yeah. Heard of that, but not sure where, right? Yeah, so API, the full name of API is called Application Programming Interface. So it is an interface. It's part of a software. It cannot be standalone. You can think of like a door belongs to a car. It cannot stand alone with only a door, like a car door. It's part of a software. So it's an interface exposed by a particular piece of software. So it's called an API. So API actually started before the web. So there was APIs before the web. But here we're only interested in the web APIs. So the APIs for the webs. Let's have a look at some examples of APIs. Yesterday, I was playing with the ChatGPT APIs. Let's have a look at that. ChatGPT. So many large softwares, they have their own APIs. So you can think of API as a black box software. So it has you give it an input, it gives you an output. So you do not need to know what is happening within that API. But you can use that API. So we have been talking about black box when testing, right? So we have black box testing. So you do not need to know what is inside a function, but you can always test a function. For API, it's also like a black box. There are API documents for the APIs, and they will specify what need to fit into that API and what it expected output from that API, so that you can use that directly. So let's have a look at ChatGPT as an example. ChatGPT API. So this is the OpenAI API. And like for almost all of the APIs, they provide an API reference, or it's also called API documentation. And they will tell you how to use their APIs. For example, here it has API reference. And you can see they provide you like how to make requests to API, OpenAI AI API, So the requests and what returned, like the transcript test, so this is about creating transcription using their API, and they tell you how to request to this API and what can be returned. Like this API also can help with quick translations, and they tell you what to request and what can be returned. Yeah, question? Oh, good. Yeah, and there are also other APIs. For example, Facebook login APIs. Facebook login API. So this is also popular APIs that we can use. Overview. And guidelines, guides. So see, they also have like how to request. Let's have a look at this one. Yep, so these are APIs. So you can think of them as black box tools that you can use. And here, like RESTful API is the most commonly used API for the web. And you can also call it REST API or RESTful API. They are referring to the same thing. And how to use it. So there are different methods of using RESTful API. For example, get, put, post, and delete. And we say post for create, get for read, put for update, and delete for delete. We'll explain what are they. And they are commonly referred to CRUD, CRUD methods. So in the previous example, like we have seen, is the get method. So app.get. So this is one example of the get method. So get, like read. Right. Before we see how, before we have examples and demonstrations on how to use RESTful APIs using this method. So here's a pretty good figure that I found online about REST or RESTful API model. So it kind of like a gateway between the mobile or web or desktop client, like the user agent and also the server. It's like a gateway. And they use different ways to communicate, like get, put, delete to communicate with the client. And the data, like communication within the server or the API with the client, is always JSON data. Okay, we'll also see examples. So here's an example called CRUD. Okay, so here's an example. The first 6 lines was the same as the previous example that we have seen. But here we have get and post. Right, so here is different from the previous example. So I have more method. So before I explain again, I will show you how it works, and I will explain the lines. Okay, so let's run this code first. So it's called CRUD TS listening on port 3001. Cannot get anything. Okay, why? Let's have a look. The reason is that the URL we put is /apple for get and /orange. So there's no only the backdash. So now let's put in, for example, apple. It says, hi, undefined, thanks for sending the apple. So the name, so we want to send a message here, like in line 11, hi, name, thanks for sending the apple. So how can we pass in the value name? Okay, so how can we, as a user agent, give this value to the server? Right, so that server can send back this message like hi, the name, and then thanks for sending the apples. Right, so how can we as a user agent give this value to it? So the way is by in the URL we give a question mark and name Yuqiao. So hi Yuqiao, thanks for sending the apples. What is happening here? Okay, so let's have a look at this code. So we have constant name, request.query.name in line 9. Okay, so we mentioned like request is the message sent from the user agent. All right, so this is what we gave the server. And the way we give this name value is by a question. I'll put it a bit larger. It's too small, I think. So what I have here in the URL is localhost 3001 apple, a question mark, name. So name is the variable here, like query.name, and equals to Yuqiao. So this is the way I pass in the Yuqiao as the value to this name variable. And then we get a value for this name, and then we can send back this message, hi Yuqiao, thanks for sending the apples. All good? What about online? Any question from online? All good? Yeah, so we can also have different, like let's practice with that. So we can pass in multiple variables into that. So for example, we can also have another variable. So for example, fruit name, and we send through the query again, through the request, like request.query fruit name, and thanks for sending the fruit. Yep, so how could we have multiple values passing in through the query? So what is a query? So when we say like we pass the value in through the query, is we pass the value in through the URL. So this is how we get the value from query, is through the URL. Okay. So the way we can do that is by adding and the fruit name equals to what apple do you want to send? Apple? Oh, sorry, what apple? What fruit? Okay. Fruit name is apple. So let's copy and paste this URL here. Hi Yuqiao, thanks for sending the apple. But we can also change that to, for example, banana. Or I think I should restart server because I changed the code, right? So I forgot to restart this server. So let's restart this server and refresh the page. Okay, hi Yuqiao, thanks for sending the bananas. We can also add more, like whatever you want. But remember, like everything like we sent through this query is a string. So we cannot pass in a number through the query. So for example, let's have number 1, number 2, and can we discuss after the lecture a little bit? Oh, good. Sorry about that. Like number 1 and number 2. For example, let's have a sum, const sum equals to number 1 plus number 2, like that. So you can see here already, the editor already tell us there's something wrong. The reason is that all the value that we get from the URL is a string, so we cannot sum them. So this is also good with like TypeScript. So what we can do here, do you remember how to change a string into a number? Pass int. Is that how it? No, passing. How? Oops. Let me have a look. Okay, it's pass int like this. The way we use that is we need to tell passing that the request query number 1 is a string, like passing through the query that is a string. So this is how we use pass int. So now, no error message again now. So we can say like the sum of number 1 and number 2 is sum. So like this. So now let's restart the server and try again. So Control C to terminate the server and run it again, listening on port 3001, and then let's put in the values in the parameter, in the query, in the URL. So number 1 equals to 2 and number 2 equals to 2. And now we get a message like the sum of 2 and 2 is 4. Right, so remember, everything you get from the URL through request query is a string. Okay. Okay, so you may also notice that we have something called JSON.string file here. We didn't have this in the previous example, the Express basic. We just RES like response send and then the string hello world. So why we had something called like a response send and then JSON string file, this JSON like this JavaScript or the JSON string. So this is a JavaScript object. So why do we need to JSON string file it? So the reason is that the message that we use to communicate with the server is always a JSON string. So we need to change like JSON string file it when we send, like when we communicate with the server. So this is why. Also because always like JSON is always the language that we use to communicate with the server. So the library or the framework is also smart. Like why like every people is doing this, like send and JSON string file. Maybe we can simplify it. And so there's a new function or method is called like REST JSON, and it's the same with what we had before. It's just simplified process. But to use REST.json, we need to change the here. So change from text to JSON here. So we can also, so here's it's the same as the previous example. So we can change to that. So this is how we using get and how we passing information through the URL and get a server sent back the message. So this is how we use get. What time is it? We have talked about how we use get method to passing in the values through the URL and send back the message using response like .json. Now we want to use post. So send is get is the way like we set information through the browser to the server, and the server responds with a message. So that is get. Well, post is send message through the body. So post is a different, like all of the 4 methods like post, get, and delete. They are all different methods of using the RESTful API. So get is client use get to access resources that are located at the specified URL. So you give a URL and they send back to you the message for that URL. So in reality, for example, in Web CMS, you can also see like, how can I make it a bit larger? I remember there's a tool like a magnitude, and you can make one. Okay, it's so cool. So what we have on the URL Web CMS is webcms3.csc.unsw.edu.au and dash COMP1531, and then dash like 23T3, and then resources, and that like the exact code here. So you can send information through this URL and tell the server what message you want the server to send back to you, your browser. So for example here, I can change that to, I change the URL to term2. It should send back to me like resources from term2. So this is how we use the URL to tell the server what we want to get back from them. So what page that we want the server to send back to us. So this is one way of sending information through URL using GET. So this is GET. Post is another way that we send data to the server, but not through URL, but through the body. So for example, we have different buttons here, different buttons there, and different or you can, another example, here you click on that, it takes you to that page. You click on the link, takes you to that. And also, another example, on our ad forum, you can also click on the like button. You can put in a comment here and post that comment. So this is like when we send information to the server in the body. So send information, send message to the server in the body, we use post. Okay, so it's not from URL, but through the body. So how can we play with that? So now we do not have a front end developed. We do not have like a text box. We can put in the text and post a comment. We also do not have the like button and whatever. So as a developer, how can we send information through the body? So now we need some tools to have with that. So talking to a web server, we can use an API client. So there are different API clients like Postman or ARC or different ones. To simplify things, we use ARC client in this course because it's lightweighted. So not too many features, and it's easy to use, and it's enough for this course, like for the 1531 project. So we'll be using ARC client. To get the ARC client, you need to search for, it's called Advanced REST Client. So you can search the Advanced REST Client, ARC. And you need to install this desktop app, and you can use this client. So it's called the Advanced REST. Oh, I should unmute myself. Oh, I have already unmuted myself. Oh, okay, cool. So this is the client that we use for this course. And I have already installed that tool, and it looks like this. Okay, so let's have a look how we use that. Okay, so I'm running on port 3001. And I send Apple. So now let's try the get method first using this API client, and then we'll show how to use post method using this API client. So it's not only useful for post, but we can also use this API client for get, delete, put, and post. So let's try get first. And you can click on this button like send the request, and the response is shown here like message. Oh, the sum of sum is that. So we have added that instead of sending the fruit. So let's change back to that. What about we just use this one? It's the same, but just we didn't add it that. So that it's still sending the apples example. JSON.ts. Okay, go back to this client. It says, hi Yuqiao, thanks for sending the apples. We can also do the same, for example, like have more values put in through the URL. Okay. So this is how we use the API client for get method. But not only get method, but we can also try post. So post here, the URL is different. It's not apple again, but it's orange. So we have orange, and we send this request. Am I running the correct code? Yep. Okay, so for post, how we send information in is through this body here. And we give it like, for example, team. Name is team. So is it too small? Larger, larger, larger. Okay, so now we send, too big. Okay. And then we sent this message, said, hi team, thanks for sending the apples. So this is how we send information through the body using API client. We can also change that to COMP1531, and we send this message, and it becomes, hi COMP1531, thanks for sending the orange. Another thing that like when you first time using this API client, you need to make sure that you change here into JSON, because we are passing a JSON string, right? So make sure that you choose JSON here, and then send this message. Yep. Any questions so far? So this is like before we have a front end, before we have a complete application, how we use post to send message to the server through the body. So the API client help us with this process. Okay. Let me have a look at online. Oh, good. Good. Yep, we have an image in the slide as well. Another thing to mention is, where's my code? It's here. So we can also change this URL to Apple, and there will be no error message. Although they are of the same URL, however, they are using different API method. So one is using get, the other one is using post. So it is fine. So we can have same URL for different CRUD method. That's fine. Okay. Yep. We've mentioned that two rows can be the same name if they have different methods. We covered this one. Okay, so another one that we haven't mentioned yet is when we look at web CMS URL. Okay, so let's come back to the terms phrase here. So let me copy and paste it somewhere else because it's too small. I'll pass it here. So this is the URL for COMP1531, and you may notice that we give them some like query information, like for example 23 terms array or COMP1531. However, we do not have that question mark. Okay, so how can we know where this 23 terms array value is assigned to? So which value it is assigned to, and also this COMP1531. So how is that? So there's another way of passing information through the URL is by using params. So here's the example here. So instead of having Apple, and then we have request query.name, and then we get this name through the question mark, name equal to Yuqiao. Instead of that, we have this like dot name, And then when we put a like URL after Apple directly, we know this URL is assigned to name. So let's have a try. So here's our code, okay. What I'm going to do is after this Apple, we have name, like that, okay. And then we need to change this query to params, so that we can send values through params. So we need to change query into params so that we know that the value name is passing to request using params method, using params, not using query. Okay. So let's restart this server. Crud.json. Okay, it's listening on port 3001. I'm going to open a web browser, and instead of question mark after Apple, I put URL directly, and it says, "Hi URL, thanks for sending the Apple." So this is another way of sending message from the URL for the get method. Okay, so I can also change that, for example, into team, and then "Hi team, thanks for sending the Apple." Okay, we can also add more. So for example, we can also have fruit. Okay, and then we have fruit, and fruit, and similarly we can have fruit. Okay, and you can also add more to it, and it will work something like this. So dash COMP1531 and 23 term 3, and then more details like outline, and then you can have more. Yep. Any question? All good? So this okay, for post we can also use params. Okay. Using like body.name, we are passing in the value of name through the body, right? Like we use the API client, like ARC client. However, for for post, we can also send through params, like this. And we have name, like that. So that now we can also use post, but sending the information through the URL. In our API ARC client, so let's run this again. So it didn't work last time. CRUD 2. Listening on port 3001, and this is our ARC client, and it's post. Orange. Oh, it's Apple instead of orange. So it's Apple, a typo in the URL. Okay, so now it works. So I had an orange here, but it should be Apple. Okay, so now you see that we can pass in value through URL for post as well when we use params. Yeah, a silly mistake that I made before. Like I should have Apple, but I had orange. So that you can see, like when we are using params, you can pass in values through the URL for both post and get. Okay. Okay, we've already mentioned this. Like instead of express.text, we can use express.json so that we can have response.json and response.json instead of response send and then JSON stringify the object. Okay, so another thing that Michael provided a solution online, like we need to stringify for post. Okay, thanks, Michael. Let's have a look at that later. We will come back to that. Okay, so sometimes we put version numbers in our routes to help us keep the track. So routes, what is route? So this is one route, and this is another route. So this is what we mean by routes. Okay. Let's go back to here. Okay, so now we can have something, for example, v1 or dash apple and then name. So why do we want to have this? So this is some like idea similar to the branch, like when we talk about the master branch or main branch, and then we also have feature branch. So you want to make sure you have a working directory. So you have something that your users can use, and in the meantime, you can develop something others with new features or fixing something else, like, or you're working on like a new one in the meantime. So maybe we want to have like v1, like version 1 of Apple, and then we have the users using this version 1 Apple, and in the meantime, we work on like version 2 Apple at the same time. And after a while, like they can get rid of version 1 and everyone migrates to version 2. Well, that version 1 or version 2, they are just a string. So everything in the URL, they are just a string. So you can use whatever you want. Like you can also have version 1 or version 2, but it's like v1 and v2, it's just easier. And in your project, you will be also using the versioning in your project. So for iteration 2, all the rows will be version 1, and in iteration 3, it will be version 2. Okay, so this is versioning, version in the rows. Okay, let's skip this one. We have already mentioned that. Another thing is sometimes we want our APIs to return errors. And we define some errors so that when an error message is sent to us, we know what is wrong. For example, 404 is the page cannot be found. So in GitLab, some of you have already experienced that when you try to log into GitLab with a specific page, it displays to you a 404 message. Means that the page cannot be found. Well, there are also other error message. The commonly used ones include like 400, like issues with user input. For example, you want all the inputs to be lowercase, but the user just putting everything in the like uppercase. Or you ask the user to input in like numbers, but the user put in like different one. Other examples like when the user first registered to your web app, and you need to put in a password. And you may define a rule for that password, and the user input something like doesn't make sense to your rule. So like the user input is not valid for you. So this is 400 method. And 401, when someone does not attempt to authenticate properly. So like authentication issues. So there's a page, it's for admins only, but the user try to access that page. And 403 is similar, like issues with authorization, like try to access page that they do not have the authority. We'll define all the errors for you in the project. So you will know when to use 400, when to use 401, when to use 403. And 404 is like it doesn't exist. The page doesn't exist, or the resource doesn't exist. And 200 means that everything succeeds. For example, here in so we have a 404 error here, and previously we had a 200 means okay, so everything was good. So we had a 200 okay message. And this is for 200. So this is the error message. So how we use RESTful APIs to return errors. So for REST, we have one method called rest.status, and we can put in the error code, like either it's 401 or 402 or whatever, and then you can have an error message like not authenticate properly. Okay, let's have a look at this code. 4.2 errors.
So this is the one. Let's run it first. Control C, and then errors, error, no S. Okay, and it says like if the name equals to URL, if I give a name which is URL, it will return a 401 method like not authenticate properly. So let's have a try. So this is, the URL should be Apple, and if it is a URL, it'll be an error message, not authenticate properly. But we can try others. So if it's not URL, for example, if it's team, it works well, like, hi team, thanks for sending the apples. So I do not have the authentication to access the page. And with the REST status and .json, with this method, it will return directly. So no following functions will be called if I use REST status. So it will return directly. We can also change to like others, for example, 4.1, and then if I put in URL, I will get like a bad name, sadly. I need to restart server. And if it is URL, bad name, unfortunately. So you can define your own error message and define when to show the error message, like what are the criteria. Okay, so this is error, sending errors using RESTful APIs. Okay, so we talked about how we can talk to a web server through URL, through ARC client. However, there's one more method, like we can talk with the server. And this one is especially useful when we want to test our server. So with the ARC client or with the web browser, if we want to test something, it's more likely we are debugging, like we are console log something, it's like debugging. So we want to have something that we can use with Jest or something like Jest. So we need a library to help us with that. And this library, like this npm package, is called sync request code. So this library is created by one of our tutors in 1531. And it's based on a very, very popular npm library. So this is you have similar with something like that, right? You have seen something similar to this in your labs. So this library is created by Time, who is one of the admins, and he's working on the labs and tutorials, and he also developed this library. This library is for testing our servers. So how to use that? So we will demonstrate how to use that, and then we'll come back for more details. So how we use that? So we need to install first, npm install, and we put in the slide like instruction how to install this library. And then we can have 4.4 requests. So this is the one. You can see that this is very similar to what we did in the API client. Like we tell it what method we want to use, whether it's get or whether it's post, whether it's put or update or delete, like what is it. And then we give it a URL. We can also add more details in here. But here, like instead of putting this information in the ARC client, we put this information using code, using this Jest file, using this TypeScript file. Okay, so how to use that? So with this, we can work with Jest. So we can put this in the Jest. So this is the request.test. So here is it. So we are using this code in our jest test. Okay, so this is the same with here. So we are simply giving this sync request call some information, like what kind of information we want to send to the server. And we are going to use get, and this is the URL, and the query name we give is temp. So the query is what we put in the URL. It's called query. Remember, like we have res.query.name. Right, so here we use like queries. We only have one query, like which is name and it's temp. And then we get the message response from the server, and we JSON pass it. And we expect that the message return to be, "Hi Tam, thanks for sending the apple." Yep. So that we can work using just with like testing our server. Otherwise, using ARC client or using the web browser, it's more like debugging instead of testing. Like when we embed all of this code, like using this library, we can use just test, and we can implement this in our pipeline and automate the testing process. So it's very powerful for testing. Cool. And similarly, we can also have post. So this is also the information that we put in the ARC client. We tell them what message that we are using. We give them this URL. And remembering, like when we use post, we send the information through the body. So we send through the body, like name is Tam, and we JSON stringify it for the body, because the message, the way we communicate with the server is using JSON, right? So we JSON stringify it. And then this one is a bit tricky, like headers. Actually, we also use these headers in our ARC client when we use post. So this is the highlight content tab, which is application like that JSON. So you just need to have this in your code to make sure it can work. Okay, and expect the message to be, "Hi Tam, thanks for sending the orange." So let's have a try. Okay, so one more thing. To use the sync request call to test the server, first of all, we need to have the server running. So if the server is not running, it cannot send the message. Right? If it cannot send the message, we cannot compare the message, the return message, with the expected output. Make sense? So if we want to test whether the server can send back to me the proper message, we first need to make sure that the server is running. Only when the server is running, it can send the message to us. So for example, now the server is running and listening on port 3001, and then when we put in a URL, like in a web browser or in an ARC client, it can send a message. Otherwise, if we terminate the server and we put in the URL, we cannot get the message. Make sense? Yep. So to test whether the return message is what we expected, we first need to make sure the server is running. So now we need two terminals. The first terminal will run the server. Okay, so make sure the server is listening on port 3001. And then we need to open another terminal. And this terminal will run the jest test. Jest testing is the dynamic verification, like test our code during runtime. So we need to run the code to be able to use jest testing. Does that make sense? Yep. Okay. So now the server is running. And now I open another terminal. And I just test this code. Oops. REST body, use REST body instead of What is wrong here? Okay. Get body. It asks me to. What is it? Am I running the proper 3001 and the other one we are running on here? So let's terminate it and okay, we are running the wrong code. So let's change that to CRUD.json. I think this is the right one. CRUD.json. Yeah, Apple name. Let's remove this one and change that to Apple only. And this is the orange. Thanks for sending the orange. Thanks for sending the apple. This one should work. Okay. CRUD.json. Okay, listening on port 3001. And then let's run this test. Uh-oh. Again, we got a 404 error. Remembering what is 404, meaning the page is not available. Probably I'm running the wrong one again. So, I should have a dash here, backdash here. So now it should work. So let's terminate this server and run this code again, run this server again, and let's test. Yes, okay, this time it works. So it's the same as running other jest tests, right? The only difference is, so remember like before when we run jest test, we had something like const rest equal to the value, like what is it? And then we expect this to be something. But now we just give a value to rest using our request, like the sync request occur, like using that library to get a expected output, like when running that server. Sorry, get an output when running the server, and then compare it with the expected output. Yep, makes sense. Now we can also add this to like our pipeline now. Yeah. For our iteration 2, like you'll be working with testing the behavior of the server instead of just testing the individual functions. So that your interface will change from like individual functions, like the units, into the server. Like we'll be testing the server. But it's basically same principle and same concept. Yep. Cool. We'll talk about more about iteration 2 later, but here, like your iteration 2 will build on top of your iteration 1. You'll be able to still use all your functions from iteration 1, but you are wrapping up those functions for your server. Okay, so your interface changed from the functions into the server. But you can still use the functions that you defined in your iteration 1. Okay, so something that I found very useful, like before when we were demonstrating, whenever I made some change to my code, I need to terminate my server and restart my server to make sure it works. So here's some tool that we can use to make this the process easier. Okay, so to make our life easier, that we can instead of terminate our server every time when we make a change, we can listen to a change by using Notman. And the way that we use Notman is by install this Notman using npm install. So let's copy and paste here. Now we can use npm, like instead of npm run ts node, you can run npm run notman and then the code that we want to run. And then you can see that it's now listening on port 301. Let's go to this 4.2 crowd.ts. So this is the one. Let's try to make some change to it. For example, hello, the sum of number 1 and 2 is that. So what I'm going to do is put them side by side like this. So now let's save it. Like when I Control S save the updated file, you can see that restarting due to changes, and then starting this 4.2 crowd.ts again, and then listening on port 3001. I can make more changes. For example, orange high, and again, like restart the server for us. So whenever I save a change, like delete that and Control+S to save that again. So this is how we can use Notman to listen to our change when I make change to our server file. Like we got some question about like we talk a lot about like libraries and all the packages. What the question was, what about during the exam? So can I have all the resources? The answer is that we do not have an exam. After your major project like iteration 0 to iteration 3, we will have an individual project, and individual project will happen in week 11. And individual project works very similar to your major project, that you still have access to everything. Okay, the only difference is that individual project is in much smaller scale. Like the project is much smaller and it's individual based. But if you do similar things, like you will be writing some JavaScript or TypeScript files, writing some functions, having like we'll practice in iteration 2 about how we can like write our own server, and you will be writing like adding roles in your individual projects. So in your individual projects, you will be given a code base, like a server that is already working, and you will be asked to add more roles to it. So what is roles? Roles is basically what we have seen here. So this is a role. Right, so in individual project, you'll be similar, like adding more roles. So we'll give you some roles, give you a working server, and then you add more roles to it. So this is the individual project. Yeah, question?
So when you do you mean routes, R-O-U-T-E-S, or?
R-O-U-T-E-S.
Okay.
Routes. Yeah. So this is one route. Yep, and for the code base for the individual project, it will be given to you after iteration 3 is due. So you'll be given a code base, and you have access to all the code and the tests for it. And you will have a couple of days to read the code base, and you can also ask questions for the code base. And you can also add more tests to that code base. It is flexible, and you can work on whichever day you want to work on it. But however, you need to make sure that your Thursday of week 11 is available, because that day you will be given a spec and you will be add more roles to it on the Thursday of week 11. Yeah, we'll send more notice about that, like more information about that. Just be like planned ahead and make sure that day is available for like a full day.
So how long will you have to do this?
The spec will be released in the morning, like around 9, and then it will be due in the afternoon.
Okay, so you have 1 day to do it.
Yes, so it's not like a lot of work to do. It's a very, very small project, and the code base, like the big code base, have already been given to you. You just need to add something to it or change something in the existing code base.
Okay, so you're essentially just like making some functions.
Yes. Yeah. Very similar to a major project. It's just smaller in scale and individual based. Cool. Any other questions? It looks like people here are quite busy with iteration 1. Yep. Sorry? Yeah, 1/3, like 30% of the whole marks. Mm-hmm. What is in the individual project?
No. If you get one day to do it.
Yes. So the code base will be given to you like a couple of days before. So the iterations rate is due on the Friday of week 10. So after that, we'll release the code back to you that you can rate that till the Thursday on week 11. So you will have roughly Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, like 5 days. But it should be workable in like 2 or 3 days. So you do not need to work read the code base every day in the 5 days. Yep. And then the spec will be released on the Thursday morning of week 11. Like which rows to edit, like which rows to add. So that will happen on the Thursday of week 11. All good? Yeah. Cool. Otherwise, I think, okay, we still have a little bit time. We'll talk a little bit more about the sync request code that we will use for testing of a server. So this one is actually based on another very popular library, which is called sync request. And we have been using sync request for the terms before this term. So before 23 term 3, we have been using a library called sync request instead of sync request code. And this library, let me find it in npm. So you can see that this is a very, very, very popular library that we built on. And it's easy to use, and the method that we use is the same for. Where's our test? Here's it. However, like in previous term, when we use sync request instead of sync request occur, it was very slow. Like it takes a lot of time for testing. So now, Tam, one of our tutors, they developed this new library called sync request occur on top of sync request, and now it's much, much faster. And they have quite detailed guideline on how to use that, how to install it. And they can be seen here. So if you have any question about this library, you can always post on the forum, because the developer of this library is one of our tutors, so that they can help explain a lot of details on how to use that. Okay. Here they have how to install it, how to use it, and the method, all the HTTP method can be used for it. I think one thing that, so here also some if you encounter some of the errors when using sync request occur, here are some has already been explained. One important thing is the compatibility. Sync request occur works perfectly well with Windows or Mac or Linux, and this one. But for some specific version of Windows, I think there were some compatibility issues. For most Windows, it's fine, no problems at all. But if you are struggling using it with compatibility issues, you can always post on the forum. Yeah, and you can also use the conventional sync request without the cur, the popular one on npm, However, you may take the risk like that one is quite slow. This one is much faster. So we definitely recommend using this one. But if you choose to use the like sync request, the original one is also fine. Like it also works. The only difference is that can be like slower. Okay. Otherwise, I think I've covered everything here about HTTP. I know this lecture, like we talk about HTTP for like 2 hours now, like a lot of small things in it. Lab 05 forum, that lab is very helpful. I definitely encourage you to do that lab before like your iteration 2, to get you prepared for iteration 2. The Lab 05 forum is also the only lab in Lab 5. So we only have one lab. So the Lab 05 deploy is optional. It's like an old lab from previous term. And this term, we remove that one. So Lab 05 deploy, we still give you that lab, but it's optional. It doesn't worth any marks. One thing to mention before we finish is deadline. So due date for Lab 05 is different from the other labs. So the other labs are due on Monday morning, but this lab is due Saturday on week 5. This is because we have flexible week in week 6, so we try to avoid having deadlines in week 6. So the deadline was moved a little bit earlier. We strongly encourage you to get started with this lab early, not only because the deadline is early, but because this lab is very helpful for your iteration 2. Okay. Otherwise, that's all for today. We have help session this afternoon. If you have any question about iteration 1 before the deadline, feel free to jump into the help session. Thank you, everyone.